Hey gang, we are in Kentucky right now. We're going to be doing this a little different today. I am parked on a farm in Russell County, Kentucky. We're basically going to have to do this. I'll probably have to do this as a narrated type of version and not live while we're walking. The wind is about 40 to 50 miles per hour. We're going to try it. But some amazing history right here. I'm on the farm where a little girl lived who was 10 years old, who was murdered, and her name was Nannie Pearl Womack. Now, up north we would pronounce that Womack, but down here they pronounce it Womack. And I want to thank the owner, Damon McKay, who let me come in here. He owns the land where the cemetery is. This is all private property, so if you want to see and come to the cemetery, get permission. Don't just walk in here. He's had people come in here, paranormal stories, some bad stories. He had to throw people out. So anyway, we're going to take a walk here, and I'm going to tell you the story of what happened to little Nannie. So let's just go for the walk and see how it goes. So as we walk along here, this is a story that's really going to give you a feel of how the law was handled back then in the small towns and remote areas in the countrysides. Lynch mob justice. So as we walk here, we're walking to where the homestead was. On the top of this post, you see these 3 bricks. These were said, Damon had said, these were the original bricks from the fireplace of the little homestead, little farmhouse, back in the woods there to the right. But we're going to look to the left here first, and this is going to give you a real feel for the situation. If you look way up over that hill, that is where the Mount Olive School was, and little Nannie and her schoolmate were walking home from there down a trail coming this way, and it was there where she was dragged in the woods, literally. Like if you look through there between the barns, back in the woods, maybe 100, 200 yards away. So it happened right here. In fact, it is said that her mother could hear her calling out while this was all happening from straight ahead here, which is where the homestead was back in the day. And if you see the gate to the right, which is where the spring is, and as we look to the left here, these blowing little fir trees. Down here at the base, you can see some of the artifacts, some of the large, very large flat rocks which compose the foundation for the front of the farmhouse. Of course, the farmhouse is long gone, and we're going to bend down here under this tree where the stump is, and it's kind of hard to see, but underneath there's very large flat rock there supporting the front, probably the front porch or the front wall of the house. So we're going to walk back here. Let's take a look at where the spring still is, and try not to trip over any of these obstacles, which fortunately I didn't. It was very muddy at this point right here, mucking along, but we made it, and we look down here, and there is the spring. Damon said this spring just never stops flowing. Beautiful clear water. Let's walk back and take a look through the gate. But I'm not going any further than this, over the gate. And there at the base of that large tree forming that V is where the spring actually has emanated and emanates. And look at the beautiful clovers in the water. Just a gorgeous little scene there. And that was the scene, just how it looked, imagine, back in the day when they lived here. Just beautiful. The spring running out to the west. So let's walk back, and let's walk up to the cemetery, and I'll tell you the story. So the cemetery is located up this hill, and as I walk by, this beautiful horse is giving me the stare down. And then he looks away. But the cemetery is located right up this hill, and again, don't just come here if you want to see it. Check in with Damon. I'm sure he'll let you in. But yeah, it was lynch mob justice in those days, and it was December 8th, 1908, here in Russell County. And this 9-year-old little girl, Nannie Pearl Womack, found in the woods there. It was a terrible scene. And like I said, she had just separated from her schoolmate, just walking along. There's a little split in the road, and dragged into the woods. Now, there was a character, one guy, everybody, there's always one person they start thinking about, and this person, he did it. His name was Elmer Hill. Now, Elmer was around 25 or 27 years old by varying accounts. He was described as being light-complected, weighing about 150 pounds, and he had a speech impediment. Well, Elmer was kind of slow, and they say he may have been retarded. And the local people here, sadly, would take advantage of him. They'd give him dirty jobs that no one else would do, go down in the bottom of the outhouse, or they would trick him and play with him. So anyway, they brought little Nannie's body, as they would normally do many times, to the home, have her looked over, have her be prepared for burial, the sheriff coming. But like many others, Elmer had gone in there. Everyone would go in these times and look at the body, but it was said that he was more visibly shaken than most others. Well, not sure if that's abnormal for anyone, but it was when one of the relatives said out loud, "The murderer is going to be burned at the stake as soon as they find him. And once those bloodhounds get here, they're coming up." And it is said that Elmer, who was not even, wasn't heavily suspected formally, he just conspicuously ducked out of the house, kind of looking around, and they're watching him. And then he just ran off in the woods. And of course everyone took notice, and then the word really went out. Elmer must have done it. Well, they say he was a man of bad reputation, and again, from the newspaper articles, you just don't know. But they had said it was, quote, I did the research on a lot of the paper clippings, that years before he was arrested on the charge of assaulting a schoolgirl, and that he broke out of jail and eluded arrest for a couple of years. And then he returned because the matter, quote unquote, had died out, and he was not tried. Well, not so sure about that, but in any respect, in a day or two, they had indeed brought the bloodhounds down. They came from a town called Hustonville, and they were on the trail of the culprit. And again, the newspapers were really piping in now. The word was going out, and one of the dramatic quotes, "The mother of the murder child, with streaming eyes, prayed aloud to God to bless the man for the heroic work to catch him." Well, he was trailed from the scene of the crime to a number of points in Russell County here, and then over to Adair County. And he seemed to be going in a circle. Must have been Elmer. He was on the run now, and it didn't take them long. Some say, well, back then they said when you read about it, they ended up finding him in an outhouse asleep. But then again, we talked to Damon here, and the actual story handed down is that he was actually hiding under a house. Well, the newspaper said, dramatizing, many think that the mob spirit will rule, but others think that the law will be allowed to take its course. Oh, the jailer here, they had him detained, and he was warned that there was a danger of a lynch mob forming that evening. And there was indeed a lynch mob forming. And the murmurs were going around that they were going to burn him at the stake, alive. And the plan was for the child's mother to apply the match. Well, actually, this was true. The plan was set into motion, and the plan was to bring him back where Nannie was killed here. And interestingly, according to the story that was handed down to Damon, that he told me, this was right over here. Remember, we looked at those barns in that area. There was a mill there. It was called the Heading and Stave Mill. and it was where they made barrels. And they had it all planned out. They had already gone there, and they had erected a very large post. They drove it, a massive stake they'd driven into the ground, and they put a huge chain on top, which they would assumably tie around the victim, and they had already brought in the scraps from the mill to make a huge wood pyre that they'd light up and burn him alive at the stake. So it was on, the game was on. So Elmer was taken out to a jail in Jamestown, south of here. They had to get him out of here and get him in a real jail. And soon after, the mob just followed him right down there. Now, it's interesting because Damon's great aunt, Rose Ryder, she told him many, many years ago that when she was little, when this all happened, she was hiding behind their homestead's front picket fence, and she was laying down on the ground in the grass, the high grass, looking between the fence posts, and she saw the lynch mob ride by. I mean, they were literally 10 feet away as she looked up in a dust, all of these horses, and she said, "I know that horse." And then another horse, "I know that horse." I mean, she recognized the horses. She knew the men just by their horses. They were all wearing hoods, masks, Ku Klux Klan-like, but she knew who they were. Now, they went to the jail, and, they couldn't find him, and failing to find him, they started searching the homes. The sheriff was already ahead of them. He was heading to Monticello, which was located to the east. On the other side of what, if you look at a map, Lake Cumberland is there. It wasn't there back in the day. That's a man-made reservoir. And back in Monticello, which is still there today, the sheriff and his men, they rode all night through the hills and woods. They had gotten him there, but word leaked out. And now the mob was on its way to Monticello. Well, at this point, the sheriff said they're staying put, and we're not afraid of any mob. And he probably should have been, because on December 15th, it was 2 a.m., and things started to really, really heat up. The lynch party was formed up. They had really grown. Men had come from other counties. It was a monstrous crowd. Although for the time being, the actual leader wasn't there, not sure where he was, but they were lacking the initiative. They couldn't flip the switch. But he was expected to arrive soon, and then Elmer Hill would be strung up. Well, he did eventually arrive, apparently, because sometime in the middle of the night, it was December 17th, and it is said that the climax came after the jail had been surrounded, and an armed group of 26 men finally made their attack on the jail. They surprised the jailer. They had drawn Winchesters down on him, and the jailer handed over the keys. He's like, "Here you go." And they went and they marched down and to the cell, opened the door, and there was Elmer back to the corner on the floor. "Please, please, I'm innocent." And he was begging that no harm be done to him. Well, not surprisingly, they didn't listen. Now they wanted to put their plan in action. They couldn't wait to get him up back where Nannie was killed. Tie him to that stake. Let's go. Now they got near there, but daylight was fast approaching. They were in Jamestown, and the sun was coming up. Time was running out. We've got to get this done. He started thinking, boy, oh boy, if we burn him alive, there's going to be they made a huge pyre of wood from the mill. This was going to be a big fire, and no doubt the smoke would rise, and people would be coming from all over the country, and of course they would be recognized. So it is said they had him at this place called Greasy Creek, which runs up north-south of here. But again, according to the story handed down to Damon, not true. Now, Damon saw the hanging tree when he was young, back in the 1970s or 80s, and it actually had a plaque nailed right on it. And it is located at what was the old boat dock, and the boat dock hill below Jamestown. Anyway, it was interesting. The mob had them, and they were actually very orderly. Elmer Hill continued to deny his guilt until he was told by one of the leaders, "Hey, you've only got 10 minutes to live, buddy, so you may as well confess." And according to the newspapers of the time, he then confessed. They say he broke down and said, "Death was my just deserts." And then his final words were, "It is no use, hell is my doom." Well, again, you have to ask yourself, the newspapers at the time inflating things, fictionalizing, making up stories. Yeah, I'll leave it to you. Well, they put Elmer on top of the back of a mule. They had tied his hands and they tied his legs. They had him side saddle on the bare back of a mule, and they had the noose around his neck. His last words were basically, he just begged them not to shoot his body. Well, with that, the mule was led away, and he slowly strangled to death as they all watched. It is said that no shots were fired into his body, nor did anyone try or take him to the stake. Nobody burned his body. They didn't molest his body. And when it was all said and done, they said that the mob just quietly rode away, just the direction they had come. Elmer Hill's body was cut down the next morning and buried. Now the question you have to really ask, the question I ask is, who really did it? Did Elmer really do it? A big part of me thinks he didn't. Was it one of those mob guys where there was just a lot of lawlessness and bullies and strange people? I mean, we'll never know. But I really wonder if an innocent man was hung. Well, we'll never know. Well, we're here at the grave for little Nannie, and of course I placed the yellow rose there as I normally do. I got the flashlight out. You can take a look here. We can see April 1898 when she was born. I think that's April 7th, December 8th, 1908, that faithful day. And the stone is in really, really good condition. Here we see her name. You can see that, Nannie, her middle name, or her middle initial, I believe, and then Womack. So this is her stone. And I like it. I like that it's not washed down, pearly white. I like the natural look of that. It's like the patina on brass. It's just I like they look natural. Well, we have to say goodbye now. We're going to leave the cemetery, and little Nannie and all the others buried here. We hope you're in a better place, and may your mortal bodies rest in peace here.